So we are now mystifying the access layer in terms of being able to say you have full abilities to not just monitor, but also configure and completely cloud manage the EX switches, EX portfolio switches on the Juniper network. So that is brand new.
WLAN interview. Getting to know the leaders, movers, and shakers in the wireless LAN world.
Welcome back to Wireless LAN Professionals Podcast. And this podcast is going to be special for us. We'll be working in a video format. This is our first video blog kind of thing we'll be doing. So it's a podcast/video. You could listen in on audio only, or you can watch. We'll have both available for you to watch. Well, today we have some folks, some friends and new friends from Mist. And I think they're kind of taking over the world, so I'm going to coin a new term, Mistify. They're going to mystify us with some new things they've got going. How about if I have them introduce themselves? First up, Jussi.
Hey everybody, I'm Jussi. I do all kinds of janitorial duties at Mist, including hang out with Keith. Thank you for having us. Thank you so much, Keith. Love your podcast.
Glad to hear it. Wes.
Hello, my name is Wes Purvis. I'm on the product management team. I work with Jussi and Abhi at Mist, and happy to be here.
Abhi?
Hello, everyone. My name is Abhi Shamsundar. I'm a part of the Mist product management team as well. And I am actively involved in mystifying Juniper products. I'm taking your lead, Keith.
Well done. I appreciate that. Well, we're here today, and you have some new stuff to show us. So rather than just get off in the weeds, let's jump right in. What's the new things you want to show us that's from Mistify/Juniper/ the whole group there?
Well, since Abhi, you've been kind of the center point of this whole thing, why don't you take it away?
Absolutely. So one of the most important USPs of Mist, as far as we've been doing Wi-Fi business, has been for us to say, how's your network doing from a client's perspective? And all of that is possible because of the telemetry that we get from the access points. Now, the fresher the telemetry, the more real data that you can give and make very good insights out of it. And that's what we call as the Sle Framework, the service level expectations. Keeping to the same theme, we've gone about and taken the next level, that to which the devices connect to, which is the access layer. So we are now mystifying the access layer in terms of being able to say you have full abilities to not just monitor, but also configure and completely cloud manage the EX switches, EX portfolio switches on the Juniper network. So that is brand new. You're seeing everything that is Mist team from the perspective of Juniper switches starting now.
Well, I have a question for you. One of the things I like about the Mist part, where your radio resource management uses the client's perspective in making decisions. So once it makes a decision to change the transmit power, if it causes clients difficulty, then we fix it and go take it back if it's a problem. So how is this mystifying on the switch level going to affect things? So I can see how a client and RRM have really good interface. What's the next step at the access layer going to give us?
That's a really good question, Keith. So in terms of how we have approached the RRM problem, very similar thought process behind approaching the switch problems as well. We've taken into consideration as to what are the most common problems that come into the switch world. In terms of, for example, we went one layer at a time. So layer 1 and layer 2 issues at the switch layer, saying we also spoke to how JTAG receives cases. JTAG is the tag for Juniper. One of the most common themes amongst all of them were for us to say, what common problems do you see? Is there a problem of us to say, one example is for us to say, you have bad cables, but you don't know about it. And how are we able to find that out? Again, using telemetry is what we're bringing in. Being able to proactively tell you that your device that is connected to is connected via a cable that is going bad or an optic that is going bad. Similarly, you have issues wherein you're going ahead and storm controlling a device way too much than it should be because this device actually has more bump traffic. Giving such insights as to what devices are affected amongst your, every campus. We're talking about tons of ports, probably the Juniper Sunnyvale campus, we're talking about 10,000 ports right there, and being able to identify exactly the interfaces to which clients are connected to and showcase only those ports as affected items through various different pieces, right? You have cables that may have gone bad. You probably have congestion wherein your uplink traffic is constantly being dropped because you're not able to, pass traffic along. The interfaces isn't able to handle traffic along. Things of this nature, addressing problems from the customer perspective and bringing them about to the forefront instead of having to them hunt and peck, go into each individual interface is what we're bringing to the switchboard.
Well, I like that. But since this is a video format this time around, can you show us?
Yeah, definitely. Would love to. Let me go ahead and share my screen.
And while Abhi is setting it up, Wes, what you were involved with this quite heavily as well. What was your kind of, if you had to name one favorite thing that you had in the product or the project leading to this? I know it's a tough question, and it comes, I'm throwing you under the bus. But did you have something there?
Yeah. So far, my favorite thing that we've done switching wise is we have a map view, and this part's not new. We've had it for a little while, but we have a map view of which access points are connected to which switch. So it allows you to see, if I lose a switch, what's my blast radius? And so that's traditionally been my favorite feature of switching. But with some of the new configuration stuff that Abhi is about to show, I think that there are some really interesting things that we've done in terms of making configuration easy, right? Which is one of the things that wireless has historically been pretty good at, is making configuration easy. And through you've had a controller to be able to bulk configure your access points at once, and that's one of the things that Abhi will show is how we can very easily and in bulk apply configuration across many switches. So
this is kind of like your demo when you did 500 in 5 minutes or something?
Yeah, exactly. It's being able to provision, configure as many switches as you would like, and an easy, you don't have to, all right, port 1 is going to be this, port 2 is going to be this, being able to, in an easy, either in an automated way or in a standard fashion, be able to apply configuration, just like you can do to an access point. I think that's kind of, that has me most excited about on the configuration piece.
So I've seen Ryan Adsma has done some demos before showing how that can be scripted, and because the API is inherent in Mist device. How does that work when we move up to the Juniper stack with that API levels?
So the API is now, through Mist available also for the switches. And when you mentioned scripting and automating deployment of sites and stuff like that, many of those features that, for example, previously have required switching even, like auto provisioning APs, auto naming APs, that kind of stuff, that's actually brought into the Mist UI these days as well. And now even, for the APs, but also for the switching, like much of those things traditionally done through the Mist API now are done through scripting.
So how much of is it that you're talking to the Mist API and the Mist API internally talks to the Juniper API, or is the Mist front end talking directly to the Juniper?
Mist front end is talking to the Mist API. That's how it works in all of Mist. Like everything that you see in the front end comes from the Mist API, and then Mist under the hood talks with the Juniper. Was it using SSH, right?
Using netconf and over SSH, a secure channel for us to talk to the switches. But as Jussi said, so our first forefront is always building the APIs. So whatever you see in the APIs today, even from the switches perspective, so in the UI today, you already have a lot more from the API perspective, because that is built first. So everything that Ryan did in terms of being able to say, him able to script provisioning 500 sites, totally possible with exactly same process, and same process and efficiency for the switches as well. Again, That is fully thanks to us building the APIs first and then going on and building UI on top of the APIs.
Well, let's see what you got.
Awesome. So most of you who are familiar with Mist are aware of this particular screen. This is what we call as the SLE framework. Now, we've brought the exact same SLE framework into the wired world as well. We have very similar constructs. You have pre-connection as well as post-connection. Pre-connection speaks about how well are you able to connect to the network. If you're having authentication problems, you're running .1x, MAB, either one of those on your switches, we are able to identify and let you know that you have problems connecting. And again, the engine where we are able to identify the scope of impact, whether it's just one device or is it all devices connecting to that switch or all the switches, that also is a part of the Marvis action story. Similarly, that's successful connect as an SLE. It has two classifiers, the DHCP piece. If you are unable to get an IP, we are able to let you know as to which clients are affected. And also there is a third piece along with the pre-connection and post-connection is switch health. Again, this is learnings from who we spoke to as customers, as well as people who are actually fielding questions. All of those resulted in having a switch health SLE as well. But what is really exciting for me is the throughput SLE. The throughput SLE is further classified into 4 different pieces, 5 different pieces now, wherein if you're being storm controlled a lot and your actual device requires a lot more, in terms of if your storm control parameters are super aggressive, it is a quick indication whether it's sporadic or not in terms of timelines. Congestion, I think it's one of the cool things that we are able to say, just by looking at this particular on this particular screen and double clicking here and say, these are the interfaces that are constantly congested. Is it time for me to upgrade those links? And that is exactly our intention, for us to showcase both congestion as well as congestion uplink. What that also means, we are able to directly understand what an uplink is, or it means we derive, again, using some of our algorithms for us to understand which is the uplink for a switch, and understand that a lot of devices, sometimes if everything is going northbound and the uplink is also 1 gig, you might see some congestion, and it's not very evident for an everyday user unless we bring that about, saying what kind of packet drops. Is it bursty, or is it constantly having issues with congestion? We bring that about as well. This piece is one of the interface anomalies bucket. It's a bucket which encompasses 3 different problems under it. One of them being you having a bad cable issue. One of them being your devices that are connecting to the network are not negotiating very well. The third one being if you're having MTU mismatches where the traffic is flowing from one switch to the other. The other switch has, jumbo frames configured, but on the other side, you left it at system default. At layer 2, with MTU being mismatched, they're dropped. The packets are dropped, and we are able to identify such issues as well. That is and the new one that we've introduced is the network SLE. The network is an extrapolation of us talking to the switch, saying that your we know what the round trip time looks like. We know what the latency and jitter looks like. So if your traffic is northbound, going outside, we are extrapolating that information from our experiences and saying, you might have this kind of experiences when you're going through. If my ISP, for example, this is my home switch right now, I did see a couple of dips over the last night. You could see that, and you could double click further as well. So on further click, you'll be able to see whether it was caused due to latency or jitter, and exactly at what times did that happen. Similar constructs for interface anomalies, congestion, all of them. The good part is you'll have a very small, concise list of interfaces that is being affected at any given point in time. So we can switch back a few days and see a few of those devices if there are anything affected. But the goal for us, again, has always been showcase exactly the areas and the distribution of devices that are being affected. Similar is the story of us being able to bring the Marvis action story to the same to the table here as well. Marvis Actions has always been our cup of coffee view for us to showcase what does the admin immediately need to attend to in the when they look at their dashboard in the morning. If they have anything that they need to be concerned about, it will show here. So missing VLAN, this is one of our popular stories with missed APs and the switches in place. We are able to identify if there is a VLAN provision on your WLAN interface, but it has not been plumbed on your switches. The trunk is missing that interface. We are able to identify you, so you don't have that AP going in the dark. Bad cable, you can click on the bad cable. You can exactly look at what port that is affected. You will also be able to run a cable test on top of it because you now completely own Juniper switching.
I have a question for you, just in the short term while you're talking.
Sure.
One of the things that Mist is good at is collecting lots of data and doing some analysis on it. If you have all the switch data collected, is it possible to give me an answer to the question, do I need to go to mgig on my APs? So if you can track that traffic, can we see, are any of the APs exceeding the 1 gig at the access layer? You talked about it going upstream, but can you tell whether or not we're congested from switch to AP?
Absolutely, Keith. So the service levels, if you look at the throughput, the congestion piece is exactly dedicated to that. So this identifies anything that is downstream from the switch perspective. So if your AP is sending out enough traffic that at some point in time the switch isn't able, or the interface isn't actually able to handle it, we are able to identify and actually indicate exactly the region where, or the interfaces where maybe it's not all APs, maybe it's some APs in some crowded area, or you were doing a test in a lab with 160 wide 160 wide channel. Either cases, if you are able to create a situation where it is exceeding a gig and it is a 1 gig connection, we'll definitely be able to identify right here under the congestion metric and point you to exactly the interfaces that are affected because of the problem that you just described.
Thank you. Can you apply that across your entire infrastructure to say, 10% of our switch ports that are connected to APs need to be upgraded? Or, I mean, what I'm looking for is some metrics that we could give back to say it's time to upgrade our switches.
I think that's a very good thought. If it is something, a metric in terms of saying, if we know that it is the APs that are constantly under the congestion story, it definitely is not a bad idea for us to go through. We have the answers. It's just the way we represent it, and I think it's definitely not a bad idea for us to think about it.
And it's here, right? If you look at the congestion percentage, just to make it clear, what we're looking at is all the switches and all the client devices connected to those switches. So that congestion percentage would tell you, like, across my entire infrastructure in this organization, like, how badly congested is it? So this isn't like a view of a single switch or anything like that. This is all the switches in the entire organization. So,
sorry, I took you off your pace there. Return to your demo.
Apart from the Marvis actions, which we just spoke about, we also do have, as Keith alluded to, there is a ton of information we collect. You have a lot of information that you could look at from the switch perspective on every single individual switch perspective. How many, what's the CPU utilization, memory bytes, what's the power draw, are you close to being oversubscribed, things of that nature, as well as if anything comes up in the port errors.
May I interject for a second?
Go ahead.
I would just add one point, right? So the kind of the journey of Mist, right? If anybody has ever had a Mist presentation, you kind of know, and at Mobility Field Day, we've been telling the story for years of we're on a journey of to a self-driving network. And so on the wireless side, the first step was getting the data into the cloud. And then from there, we could do data science and our AI on top of the data that we have. And so we're very well on that journey on the wireless side. And actually, we've gone through that same exact journey on the switching side as well, which is what Abhi is showing. So the very first step was getting the Juniper switches to actually connect to the cloud and getting data from those switches, right? And we've done that, and we've been doing this for months now. And so you'll see us continue to leverage this data just like we've done for wireless. Do the same thing for wired, and we're seeing that with the SLEs that Abhi just showed. We have the raw data, which is what Abhi is showing on this screen. And there's just so much potential that we can do now that we have the data into the cloud.
Good point to kick in another question. And I'm just being obvious here. I'm assuming this is for Juniper switches, or can we mystify, somebody else's infrastructure?
That's a very good point. So some of the features for monitoring are available for all of the switches. LLDP med, we extract information. So if you plug in even one Mist AP on that switch, we get information on like Abhi might have some examples here, but a decent amount of information we get from any switch. But from Juniper switches, we get a lot more, plus the configuration. We cannot today configure anybody else's switches, for example, than Juniper.
There's no reason that we couldn't. It's just a matter of development effort. So I think we don't have anything to say today, but
I hear nothing. Well, so is this in current shipping code, or is this an upgrade that we have to look at getting upgraded to?
Everything you're seeing today, Keith, in terms of being able to run assurance, all the Marvis actions, as well as the config that I'm going to demo, all of this is available for beta starting last night. So we're showcasing that is shipping right now.
And I'm assuming this is like Mist, every Friday, every week you update code. So it's very current.
Absolutely. Very similar constructs. Every production push, you will definitely get newer and newer features, and that stays through the process of the switching as well. There's no changes from the architectural perspective. So I think having said, tagging on to Wes's point about being able to say, we are able to now identify, missing VLANs or bad cables. What that next translates to, our end goal for the Marvis action story has always been self-driving. What we are aiming towards as we go along is to be able to solve those problems, or at least give a better insight to the customer as we go along. One of the examples that is immediately coming out is we've understood that it's a bad cable from our heuristics or from the data we learned. Now we can also have the ability to run cable tests on the switches. So the next goal is for us to run the cable tests on the switches and have the report ready instead of you having to do that. Missing VLANs, solve those missing VLAN problems as we go along. So the end goal is for us to be, you have the data, you are now very confident of the data being presented. Then you could let the customer let us know saying, you could actually solve this problem yourself. Obviously, bad cables, you cannot switch the cables, but VLANs could be fixed, and those are the items we are driving towards in terms of artificial intelligence helping you not have to intervene, solving smaller problems as such. I think one of the most important themes of the push that came out yesterday, everything that I showcased right now has been shipping for about 4 months. But the important thing that is coming out tomorrow is our ability to configure switches and configure, not just being able to configure on an individual switch basis, but make this extremely easy for you to go and apply this across a lot of devices on your network. And that's what we specialize in terms of having the ease of configuration for individual switches, as well as managing thousands of switches at the same time. So there is flexibility in the way we've done these templates. You're able to see primary use cases of switch being utilized for us to actually create what we call as port profiles. As in, I'd like to call them as personas. Camera is a persona, AP is a persona. Any of your IoT devices like HVAC or anything like that, they all are personas, and usually they all have extremely similar configurations as they go along. An AP usually has 3 VLANs or 4 VLANs with one native VLAN. Similarly, a camera is usually one access VLAN. It is already all of this is known. Now we can easily build what we call as port profiles. By default, we already populate a few things for you: IoT, AP. I also added camera, but you could add another one called HVAC, for example. And let's give it a network. If you don't already have a VLAN associated to it, you can actually create that real quick, associate the VLAN, and there we go. We have a HVAC network right there. And now, how do you actually go ahead and percolate this information across your multitude of devices? You may have 48-port devices, 24-port devices, different models of devices. How do you push this across is where the configuration rules help you. Wherein today, for a 48-port switch, I've said you can either apply to a particular switch model, or you could also give a role to the switch saying, apply this to across all my access switches in general. And that is a very simple way of saying I'll identify all my switches as access and just push these across all of my different ports that are available. So the end goal for us is to say, you have different kinds of devices, and you would like for this to be pushed across different ports that are available. But how do you do that without complicating the templatization? And here it was a very simple way where I added the new VLAN, and now this will be available across all different devices in your network that has this template. We also have the flexibility of being able to say, I would like my switch to have only this particular switch to have something very unique. Let's say I'd like to change the radius server this is talking to because I want to verify a brand new radius server or a brand new instance of a radius server, and I want my blast radius to be small. And you could just override whatever you got from your site template, but you will always have information of what is coming from the site or a template, and what is individually on a switch. And extremely easy, quick way of configuring, unconfiguring switches, as well as this is the role that I mentioned, where you could mention what is the role of the switch, and it's pretty similar. But overall, without going into too many details of this, the configuration model is the way we have built it is for us to be able to flexible enough to run a simple one switch deployment, also manage hundreds and thousands of switches. And that's what I wanted to quickly showcase as a part of the demo. Hope it gave you a quick insight of what we are coming out with.
That was great. Thank you, Abhi. I think for the second half of this recording that we're offering, I think we should change tack a little bit and hear a little bit from each of you of how you went from, I've known Wes and Jussi for years now, and you both came from the Wi-Fi world, Wi-Fi tools, and from another Wi-Fi vendor. As you moved over to Mist was also in Wi-Fi, and now you're moving into the switch side. You're kind of going and branching out. I was just wondering how you did your own personal learning. How did you learn the new things you needed to talk about in order to support the Juniper model as well as Mist?
I think Abhi can start because he's had to go through the biggest transformation. He's a wireless guy as well.
Okay, I'll go first. So my career started off with in the late 2000s with in the QA front, doing a lot of the switching and routing. So that's where my roots are from. When I started off with routing and switching, a lot of QA, and then solution engineering from that perspective. The same role actually morphed in the early 2010s, 2011 timeframe. That's when it actually morphed into the converged wireless and wired architecture. That's where I got hit by the wireless bug. And I actually went through the wireless journey all the way from the 2011 until recently, where I had to go back to the roots of doing switching. So it was helpful that I had some origins in the switching space, and wireless is extremely tightly coupled with switching. I mean, there's usually a lot of things that are deemed wireless problems eventually has its origins in switches. So we've closely been working usually with those as well. But the background where I started from definitely helped a lot to actually bring this back. The knowledge or approach towards solving a problem is entirely from the Mist journey. As to how actually you approach any given problem, you actually take the problem as to how the customer would see this, and then how to solve the problem. But that particular journey was in the last 2 to 3 years from Mist, and combining these two is what you saw today in the wired as well as wireless spaces.
You were playing with switches and routers over 10 years ago and kind of came back to it now. What have you seen has changed in the last decade in the switch world?
I think one of the few things that come to mind, if you in terms of just the switching by itself, the core underlying architecture hasn't changed a lot, but how you actually deploy switches, it was very painful. You either write a script that goes into every box and make configuration happen, and also the underlying problems were never addressed. Saying if you have a layer 1, layer 2 issues, if you're spanning 3 loops, for example, what is the origin of the loop? Somebody plugs something in. That is always usually the origin of a spanning tree loop, and that is one of the problems we are trying to address as well, without spilling too many beans out there. But trying to address problems from the perspective, there are inherent problems at switching, and how are we able to identify and mitigate really early? That approach of one, configuring, being able to configure switches at scale, as well as identifying problems and going after them with the new tools that we have at hand. The AI or the ML based approach is new. But the core underlying architecture, there are newer architecture designs coming out right now. The Evolved Campus, wherein VXLAN is brought in to the access layer, but that is still the adoption is slow for a number of reasons. So the architecture overall in the last 10 years has remained the same, but the approach towards configuration and troubleshooting definitely has changed.
Great, thanks. Wes, how about your journey? Tell us how you ended up where you are now.
So I think so. Started out with a little bit of networking knowledge, right? That's got into networking through school, and it was kind of just a general networking, and then started to focus on wireless and have been in the wireless field ever since. But I think just like any wireless person, you always need to have some switching knowledge, because these pesky access points have to connect back to a network somewhere. And so I think my switching knowledge has always been wireless centered. Meaning, all right, what VLANs do I need to configure on the port to be able to support this access point, and then how do I get my traffic where I want it to go. And so actually for me, so I would say I've kind of, basic knowledge enough to be dangerous. But coming to Mist, and then as part of Juniper, the most difficult transition was transitioning from a Cisco iOS based switch, and where very comfortable in Cisco iOS, to Junos, which is a completely different syntax. And what is this concept of a commit or commit confirm, and these set commands, versus editing, like it's whole different ball game. And so that was actually the biggest challenge for me. And so it was just a matter of being able to pick up a Juniper switch and just play around for it. It's because the underlying functionality is the same. It's just the way that you go about it. And the thing that I like that we're doing is now that's all in the cloud, right? So you don't have to necessarily know Junos. You can, it'll help you if you know Junos, but you don't necessarily have to know Junos. So just being able to say, I want my access point to connect to this port with these settings, is something that is a lot easier now with the configuration piece that we have.
So how did you go about learning Junos from iOS? What was was it like a week and you were all better? Did you have a little cheat sheet, or did you take classes?
Every day. So there's actually a Junos for iOS engineers guide that Juniper has that helped quite a bit. And then actually what helped the most was having a Juniper switch in hand and to be able to configure it and do what I was trying to do, and just this is how you do that. This is how you do that. So it's just doing it a couple times with a little bit different syntax, and then you start picking it up, and it's a lot easier now than it was 6 or 8 months ago when we got started with it.
Jussi, you were the last one of this group to get involved and play. How did you go about the process of learning Mist, and then you had to learn Mist and then learn AI and then add Juniper on top of it?
Yeah, I mean, throughout my life, it's been a little bit of this and that. Like studies, it was IT, software development, and industrial engineering management. And my first job was business models and developing location-aware applications over a regional Wi-Fi network. So my friend built a location server from scratch, and I built applications on top of his location server. And it's been a little bit of everything. And at Ekahau, there was a lot of transitions as well. I joined as an RTLS systems engineer. So I was installing and training RTLS systems. Then we span off, site survey out of it. And, Jussi, take a look at this site survey thing, manage it and see what comes out of it, kind of a thing. And then at some point it grew really big. But the thing is, okay, we had a good run at Ekahau, but then at Ekahau, you're absolutely focused. Like Wes said, you always looked at the wired side of wireless. I didn't almost look the wired side at all at Ekahau during 15 years. I wasn't forced to. I wasn't actually installing and deploying networks at all, in all honesty. So I had almost zero experience in routing and switching before Mist. Take that and the high expectations, and you get a pretty good imposter syndrome pretty quickly, because I knew nothing about routing and switching, and also not about enterprise Wi-Fi from the practical vendor side. So it was really tough in the beginning. I'll be honest with you, but then, like Wes said, stuff like this helps. I actually have 2 of these just for failover redundancy.
The same book, just 2 copies?
Yes, absolutely. No, I'm planning to give it to somebody. But so that, and having these Juniper boxes, that's really been the key thing, I think, for me. It's just playing, you learn stuff from the books, but I'm a learn by doing kind of a guy. So just start configuring, SRXs, EXs, and see what happens and break them, and then get eternally frustrated by me not being an expert and stuff like that.
I think most of us who are in this industry have home labs for that very purpose. So what I'm hearing is if you want to be making this transition over the switches, you got to start playing with switches more.
That's the only way, I think. And the more you plug stuff in and the more you break them, the better off you are. And that's the frustrating part. Now, after all these countless hundreds of hours of this and the switches and everything, now Abhi, you come out with something that simplifies it way too much. Where's the credit for all the Junos that I had to go through? Where's the credit, Abhi?
It's in your knowledge. You have it internally, you see. Just feel good inside.
I don't even know what that means, Keith, but yeah, I'll take it.
So what would you recommend if someone was saying, okay, I like what I saw here today that Abhi showed. How would someone get involved? What's the next step? Say they're a CWNA, maybe a CWAP, they understand wireless, but they see this whole cloud thing and AI is in the future. What would your recommendations be on to have them move forward?
same thing as before. Just get your hands on some like modern Wi-Fi gear and put it on the side, like you have your legacy stuff. Put one or two modern stack Wi-Fi gear next to it. Put a switch that connects to it, and see how it works. You don't have to like it, right? It's not for everybody, but at least give it a go.
Wes, your recommendations?
Yeah, it's just a matter of playing for sure. I think that you learn by doing, and you get interested by doing, and so you can watch demos all day, but until you actually have hands-on with what you're trying to figure out, you don't really learn as much as you can. So my recommendation is just try it out.
I tend to agree. I started on the Mist online training and was looking at a screen and went, wait, I have a Mist here. Let me just log into the dashboard. And I did, and then I got lost for a couple hours playing. And when I came back to the course, I went, oh, I already know that. Because you learn a lot on your own just by playing with it. And I think it's what Jussi said. It's when it breaks and you get frustrated, that's what forces you into doing the extra learning.
Absolutely. But I gotta say, like, also the fundamentals are important. I had to take a Juniper course of like a few days of switching and routing basics. Like, I mean, you get pretty far by just screwing everything up and fixing them, but you also need to understand the fundamentals. Agreed.
Yeah. If you don't know networking, ultimately you need to know networking. I don't think that requirement is going away.
Abhi, your recommendations?
Absolutely agreed. I was about to just say the same thing. You start from the basics, especially when for us, when you're developing products, it actually is extremely important for us to go through and understand what the existing technology is and where the problems lie and how do we address them. Very similar construct for somebody who's coming into playing into a new way of doing things. Maybe we can take the easy route of using the dashboard to configure quickly and get by. But then eventually it will help over a long period of time to understand what is underneath. And that is what will make you a better engineer. That's my thought process.
Well, I'd like to thank all three of you, Abhi and Wes and Jussi, for your input today. We'll put in the show notes links to that Junos for iOS engineers document, as well as links to the training pages for Juniper as well. If you're interested in Mist, they have tons of webinars. You can see previous ones, but they're producing them all the time. So for those of us at Wireless LAN Professionals podcast, we're grateful to the people who joined us, and we'll see you next time around.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Wireless LAN Professionals podcast, the podcast for wireless LAN professionals by wireless LAN professionals. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at Wireless LAN Pros for all the latest news and updates, and also connect directly with Keith on Twitter at Keith R. Parsons. Head over to www.wlanpros.com for this episode's show notes, as well as the latest in all things Wi-Fi.